And Postecoglou came from Celtic, didn't he, Ed? What did you think that Postecoglou was going to do this well?
Yeah, I mean, I can speak with some authority about Big Ange because he was a massive loss to us, and he's very easy how he can become a cult hero because you've probably already seen the way he is with the media. He suffers no fools. He has a philosophy and has a way, and a lot of people think, oh well, who's this guy? We don't know. You know, he's managed for a long time. He's progressed his way across. He's managed internationally. You know, he's managed some good teams. Yes, he's building up in terms of the qualities of the league he's managed in. But he plays a certain way. There's nothing hidden. That is how he plays. And therefore, you know, whatever happens to Spurs this season, their fans, I think, will ultimately be happier because they'll have been entertained. Mm. You know, he plays a style of football that will be found out sometimes, will lead to some disastrous results. But he doesn't change. You know, they can lose 2 men as they did, and they were still pressing above the halfway line. His mantra is, we never stop. And that is his teams play that way. And some people think, well, yeah, you're quick to suss it out, but actually doesn't give teams time to think, you know. And he plays attractive football, and I think ultimately that's why the Spurs fans have got really excited, because in those early games they've had a few years where they've had quality managers, apparently, haven't they, who've taken a very negative approach, you know, and who. Yeah, I mean, Mourinho, Conte, they all seem to do the same thing. It's like, well, actually, we're kind of 1-0 ahead now. Well, let's actually just sit back and invite pressure. And then we wonder why then we lost the game 2-1, 3-1, and then people are up in arms. And, you know, and let's be honest, if you take away kind of like the Kane effect, that have been even more further behind in terms of negativity and everything else. So I think, honestly, from their fans' perspective, they're just enjoying watching a more exciting brand of football. So, you know, it's hard to say what he's. I mean, I don't know what his aim was for the first season. Is it to get European football for Spurs again? Maybe it is, but I think ultimately, you know, he tends to have a plan. He tends to think ahead. He will be already. In fact, Postecoglou, I know, will already be looking at next season, not this season. He says he always thinks 2 transfer windows ahead. That was always his policy. Any club he's been into. So I think, yeah, a bit of a roller coaster ride, but, you know, he's a quality man and he's great to watch, honestly. Watch press conferences with him and just the way he his looks and the way he just takes down some of the media. And he just won't entertain inane questions either, which is great. He just sort of moves on and just looks at people going, don't know why you're asking me that. You know, and I think that's sometimes a bit of a breath of fresh air, because I think sometimes managers play very much like they pretend to be kind of almost politicians and diplomats sometimes, don't they? And he doesn't. He is who he is, and he's there's a bit of man love going on there. If I'm perfectly honest, I absolutely adore.
You did refer to him as Big Ange, so
he's great guy.
Maybe that's the identity that Spurs have been missing. That identity of play, that style of play. Because if you think about over the past sort of 5 seasons, they haven't had that. They've had a good squad, but they've never really developed and kicked on from that. And maybe that's just what they needed, that identity, that kind of reassurance from the back. And to be fair, I'm not a massive Spurs fan. I'm not a Spurs fan at all. They're a bit of a bogey team for us over the years, but I quite like Big Ange. And it's just what you were saying, Ed, about that whole way he is with the with the media, and the way he shuts them down. It kind of reminds me of a much better Chris Wilder.
I think one thing that's interesting for you guys to know is he's not one of those managers who's very close to players. So, you know, he's not one of these that he'll put an arm around a player. He will sit over lunch at the training ground with them. He keeps a distance, you know, so he invests in his players, but he keeps a distance. And, you know, one of his things I always remember him quoting is like, you know, never fall in love with your heroes too much, because they're never going to be there forever. And he stays that, and he sees that kind of thing about football is that actually don't get too sucked into the same team, to the same players, the same manager, because these things are transient. These are things that change. You know, enjoy the times while they're there, because you don't know what it might look like sort of in the next year. But it's funny, interesting speaking, listening to some of the Celtic players now who played under him and are now playing under Brendan Rodgers. And they say the styles are very different. Rodgers is very much, I'll sit with you at lunch, I'll talk about you, I'll find out about your personal life, I'll do all that kind of thing, which is one style. Ange wasn't like that. He was very much about, he relied heavily on his first team coaches to do a lot of that face-to-face stuff with people. So that's a kind of a different style, but I think that's part of his self-protection as well. I think he keeps a step removed so that he can look at strategy and look at everything else, but he's not kind of he's not going to be your mate, which is his quit. And therefore we want to know how he works with the media. As soon as someone asks him a question and the first word out of his mouth is, "Look, mate," that's when he's going to take a journal down. If he doesn't say "look, mate," he thinks it's a reasonable question and it's worth answering. If he starts his answer with "look, mate," that journalist better just give up. So there's something for you to look out for.
So Spurs, watch this space. We'll see what happens. As we were saying, the next game is Villa at home for them. So we shall see after the international break.
It'll be one hell of a test, that one.
Yeah.
6 points for both.
Yeah. Well, it is. It's because it's fourth versus fifth, isn't it, at the moment?
Yeah.
But it's also tight there.